So I get to introduce our speaker this evening. And not that I don't know him, but there's a nice little bio that I have. He probably doesn't know this. But my friend, our friend, Dave Kinskey is our speaker. And let me just find his bio that I got from his lovely wife. Are you scared yet, Dave? You should be. No. So first of all, I want to say that Dave is an attorney, and so we have asked him to come here this evening and speak as an attorney, because we have a lot of questions on the legal side, as we do. Later, we'll have another speaker and we'll talk about some VA, some navigating and benefits. But Dave is an American politician and a Republican member of the Wyoming State Senate, representing the 22nd District since July 8th, 2014. He previously served from 2005 until his appointment to the State Senate as the mayor of Sheridan, Wyoming. Dave has, we don't have all the time to do all the things that Dave has done and continues to do, but his wife did say, if you want to know a little bit of what his wife, words of his wife, he is always entertaining and never dull, and he's very attentive to her needs. For that, he is a genuine keeper and as a spouse. So, Dave, we welcome you. Thank you for being with us.
We will have been married, this July 5th, we've been married 49 years. And so for the 50th, go back May of last year, I told her, I said, you've told me how you played piano from 2nd grade to sophomore and you wanted to learn again. And I've never played an instrument, can't read a note. I said, so I know something fun we can do together. We'll take piano lessons together. And so that's been going along better for her than for me. She's learning more. And then I also told her, this was May of a year and a half ago, I said, our first date was a dance. Mm-hmm. It was the Sadie Hawkins dance. Does anybody remember Sadie Hawkins dance? That's when the girls got to invite the boys. So she invited me to dance, and I went with her, and the rest is history. But I said, you've been trying to get me to dance ever since, and I've tried to avoid it, and I think it's time I manned up and learned to dance finally. So we've been taking dance lessons together. The key is the teacher comes to the house, so nobody can see my humiliation. And she said, how many lessons? And I said, how many years would be the better question, because I've never done anything like this before. So things are going along swimmingly. And I said, I've got an idea for our 50th. We'll play a piano duet. And we'll tell jokes back and forth. She goes, I don't know. I don't know. I said, you'll love it. So we get all this planned out. And then the piano teacher says, and I think you should sing to me. And I said, I don't think so. And Donna says, yeah, you got me into this. You're going to sing. So now we're going to have comedy, musical, singing, piano duet. For our 50th, it'll be, July 12th at the Bio Theater Black Box. Everybody's invited. And, once you hear me sing, you may decide it was a mistake to come. But so let's just talk a little bit about wills and estate planning. 2/3 of Americans do not have what would be a complete estate plan. And why is that? Well, first, for 40% of Americans, they say, I don't have enough assets. That's just for people that are rich, which is not true. Cars, bank accounts, a house, something has to happen to those when you're gone. And who gets those things? But more importantly, who's going to take charge of just just making sure that everything gets done that has to be done. And what a will does is it says who your executor is. That's important to have, because otherwise the court has to make that decision. It also says two other things that are important. It says whoever's my executor has the power to sell things without coming to court for an order. Because unless that's there, you die without a will. Every time the trustee wants to do something, they have to go and get an order, which costs a lot of money. So this just says my trustee or my executor can sell any assets on the terms they see fit without a court order. And then the other thing that it does that's typical is it says my executor can serve without a bond. So a bond, if it doesn't say that, you have to go out and buy a bond as an executor, and it's an expense, it's a hassle. And so a will just makes those things easier. But the other thing is it just tells the people you leave behind what you want to happen, as opposed to the law deciding what's going to happen. One other thing that's important is if there's anybody who's a minor that's left behind, a will can set up a trust for them or decide what's going to happen there. So I do see some younger people here who may have small children. For those that are of an age where your children are grown, but you have grandchildren. So if one of your grandchildren, God forbid, dies before you do and leaves small children behind, and that grandchild's share, you don't want a 10-year-old getting a bunch of money or even any significant amount of money. You want to know what's going to happen to that. And so you can say if there's any minor that comes in by way of anything, here's how I want that dealt with. I want their parent to be entrusted with it, or if you don't, the step parent or their, if let's say your daughter dies, you may or may not want your son-in-law to have the money, have charge of the money. Maybe you want one of your other children to have charge of it. You can specify all those things. So a lot of this, it's not pleasant duty. Contemplating your demise is just not a lot of fun. But it's an exercise that has to be undertaken. And then with a lawyer, hopefully they'll help you walk through the various kinds of scenarios. So typically people will think of their 3 adult children, but what about the grandchildren? What happens then? So that's, with or without a lot of assets, it's important to have, because it can reduce the cost for everybody that's left behind. That's legal documentation, the legal fact of having a will. The other part of a complete estate plan is to have a durable power of attorney. There's 2 kinds. One is for your financial decisions, and the other is for your healthcare decisions. So what a durable power of attorney says is, if I cannot make my own financial decisions for whatever reason, I appoint this person to be able to make those decisions on my behalf. And then it typically will go with, 5 or 6 pages. I give them the power to make my banking, to pay my bills, to file my tax returns, to deal with my governmental benefits. It's all the things that some government agency or an institution is going to say, well, who are you? How do I know I can deal with you? You give them the power of attorney, and they look at it, make a copy, and say, okay, how can they help you? Without that, they have to use your affairs. Whoever's taking care of your affairs has to go to court, get a conservator, a guardianship appointed, which is expensive and takes a long time, as opposed to just having this document. The other one is the power of attorney for healthcare decisions. That says if I can't make my own healthcare decisions, Here's who I would appoint to make those decisions for me. And if that person's not available, then this person. And that's important for the obvious reasons. I will tell you that I show my 3 children where that paperwork is, and the middle daughter says, don't put me on that healthcare thing. I don't have to make those kind of decisions. I said, well, let me tell you, honey. My brother was in the hospital. And somebody had to make the decision. But we were done. It's time to let it go. That was me. I made that decision. There was a social worker there that turned to me and said, it's an act of love. I said, it doesn't feel like it. But I realized in hindsight, she was right. I told my daughter, who else would make those decisions for me but somebody who loves me? I don't want people that hate me making those decisions. Right? It's got to be somebody who knows me. Somebody who says, this is not what Dad would want. What he'd want is to be let go. Or no, this is the kind of decision I think he would make. So that's important. I will say one thing about the healthcare power of attorney that I think is also important is you always, there's usually 2 or 3 people in your life, maybe 4, that could potentially go on there. And it's tempting sometimes to say, I want all 3 of my kids to make that decision jointly. And there were times where I would draft a document that way. And then I was talking to a friend of mine who's an oncologist. He says, don't do it that way. He says, listen, first this one, and if that one's not available, then this one, if that's not. And typically they'll do it just in birth order or something. And he said, here's why. If there's 3 children, 2 are at bedside, and 1 is in Japan, 1 is on the other side of the country. And when the 2 are at bedside say, we need to let Dad go, the 3rd one says, you're going to kill Dad? What do you mean? Because they're not there. They don't know what's going on. And again, back to the situation with my brother, when I flew down to Flagstaff to see him, my mom, my dad, 2 of my sisters had been there for weeks. And my dad said, when he picked me up at the airport, the social worker told me to tell you, social workers really not good, told me to tell you to don't be surprised when you go in there and you see him and you're overwhelmed and we're standing there and you think that we're not grieving. But David, we've been here for 3 months and this is your first time and it will hit you and so on. He was absolutely right. I went in there and I just started bawling like a baby to see my brother laid out in that bed. They were just standing there. And had I not been warned, I would have thought, well, how can they not be moved by this? Well, it's the same thing with the people with the healthcare power of attorney. The people who are at bedside know what's going on. Somebody who's out in Los Angeles or in New York or Florida has no idea. And so they're just shocked at the idea that you might contemplate doing anything other than every heroic measure possible. And so his recommendation was, first this person, if they're not available, then this person, if they're not available, this person. That usually means that somebody will be at bedside who's familiar with what's going on that they can talk to. So that's the will, the durable power of attorney. Let me circle back to the durable power of attorney on financial decisions. That one's very sensitive because you're giving that person a lot of power, a lot of authorization. I have seen situations where person whose name is on that has changed the bank accounts, so they get the bank accounts, or they put themselves as a co-owner in the bank account. And the other kids are just left out. So you've got to be pretty careful, because there it is, it's documented. You know, before Dad had his stroke, he said, appointed this child, gave them his authority, trusting that that's not what would happen. But here's the other thing to be careful of. With respect to bank accounts, IRAs, and everything else. What happens very often is you'll say, I want Stella to be able to write checks for me. Okay, so that would be an authorized co-signer on the account. Go to the bank and a very helpful bank clerk says, well, I'll just put her name on the account as an owner. Well, that's not what you wanted. That's what you got. She just gets half that account when I die. So you have to be careful. Those kind of things, you want to talk to the lawyer rather than rely on the legal advice that you get from the bank. Okay, so typically what you want to make sure of on the bank accounts is that maybe somebody has signing authority, but they're not an owner, but that there's, you can on those accounts name your kids in equal shares to inherit the account on your death. That overrides the will. That's very important. Whatever you put on that bank account, whatever you put on that investment account, whatever you put on that IRA as beneficiaries, doesn't matter what's in the will. Those override it. So you want to be careful of those designations. I know this all sounds maybe more complicated than it really should be, but it seems to be the way that we do things in America sometimes. Then there's always, this question always comes up, what about a trust? What is a trust? So a trust is something that's put together to try to avoid probate. So probate is the process by which when you die, you go to court, you file the will, and you go through a court-monitored process to see that everything's taken care of. And then that probate is closed. It costs money. It takes time. So sometimes what people do is put together a trust that just sidesteps that whole process. The downside is a trust is expensive. You know, it's a will could be 3, 4, 5 pages. A trust usually quite a bit more. But a trust can be worthwhile depending on what your situation is. Here's a typical situation. His, hers, ours. That gets just complicated enough that, sometimes it moves beyond what you would do in a will. Sometimes you've got a division of assets. In the old days, when an estate tax kicked in at $500,000, which meant if you had a house, you were subject to estate tax, right? Anything over $500,000 was taxed at 55% by the government. People would have a trust, and it would do all these complicated things to try and bypass as much of the estate tax as you could. Well, now the estate tax exemption is $12 million per person. So Stella and Clarence, you have to go over $24 million before you got to worry about the estate tax. Of course, on December 31 of this year, that all goes away when the last series of estate tax reforms ends at midnight on the 31st, and then it goes to, I think, $5 million. That's still pretty substantial. $5 million, that's $10 million. You have to be over $10 million to have a taxable estate. So it just, sometimes a will is enough. Sometimes a trust is what you need. And there, I guess I'd leave it, as a conversation between you and whoever's doing your estate work. I know it won't be me because I'm retiring December 1. Don't know what I'm doing after that, but that won't be practicing law. I only, I'm gonna find something else. I just don't know quite what it is.
Live on Broadway.
Life on Broadway. There you go. Thank you. Thank you. They won't be casting me anytime soon. There's I still have this anxiety dream. I've been in one play in my life. And it's this dream where I cannot remember any of the lines. Any of the lines. And it's a bad dream. It's just like you're standing there on stage with other people looking at you, and you're just like, is there somebody with a script off stage who can give me a clue? Okay. So that's a trust. Then the one other thing, we can open it up for questions, but the one other thing that I want to suggest to you that's just a very practical thing is you'll get these, the lawyer will hand you the originals, usually a copy, sometimes a thumb drive with them electronically, but most people know enough now to go to the store and have them scanned onto PDF and they put them on their computer. That's great. Here's the problem. You've had a stroke, your kids don't know where to find it on the computer. They usually don't know where to find the paperwork. So this is what I do. It's really old school. Just a free reminder. I don't even put it in a drawer. It's on the shelf. You can't miss it. David and Donna Kinskey, estate documents. Now next to that is my sister's, because I'm her trustee. Next to that is another sister's, because I'm her trustee. Next to that is a brother's, because I'm not his trustee, but I just feel like he gave me the documents because he knew that if something happened, they'd call Uncle David. And so I've got him there. And so I've shown my kids where this is. They go, well, nothing's going to happen to you. I said, oh, yeah, well, no, that's what you think. But just remember, you saw this on the shelf. And if all else fails, you can get a neighbor to come over and, open up the house and grab it for you because it's got our health care power of attorney. You're going to need to have that to make decisions if me or mom is in the hospital and can't make the decisions for us. So the will is in here. The healthcare power of attorney is in here. The durable power of attorney for financial decisions is in here. And then I've also got, because I'm a little bit, kind of over the top, it's about just a several page memorandum that just says, here's where the bank accounts are. Here's where our retirement account is. Here's a safety deposit box. Here's what's in the safety deposit box. Not a whole lot. The originals of the wills and all the passwords. All the passwords are in the safety deposit box. And so periodically I go down there, open it up, put the new passwords in because I do update those. And so then there's some other things here, just like some correspondence with our where our IRAs are, because they had a provision that said if you name 3 beneficiaries and one dies, we're giving that share to the other 2. That's not what I want. This one dies, I want the grandkids to get it. They said, well, you have to write us a letter. The letter's in here, just in case that can't be found. Stop. Says I'm going to Holy Name to have a presentation. So it's a little bit old school, and then I have sent all these documents to my kids, but they have kids, they have lives, they have jobs, they have careers. I figure when they really need to find it, they're probably not going to be able to, but just in case, I've sent it to them and I've explained it to them, just so that they have some rough understanding. And then I've made sure that they've met the person who prepares our taxes. So now you may never, they were, you know, 2 of them are home for rodeo. And I said, I want you to meet my accountant. Not everybody has an accountant, but you know, I haven't done a tax return in 30 years. So I don't understand them. And I don't like, it's a fight that Donna and I had when we did the taxes ourselves. So I said, let's just hire a referee. I'll pay an accountant just so we don't have to go over, you know, what's deductible and what's not. Let them figure it out. So I said, I want you to meet this gentleman, and you may never meet him again, but he's young enough, chances are when you meet him, you'll remember that and you'll have heard us say, we trust this fellow. And the same thing with the person who prepared my estate plan. I did not prepare my own estate plan. There's an old adage. Any doctor who treats himself as a fool for a patient, and any lawyer that does his own legal work as a fool for a client, because you're too close to it. Too close to it. You can't see what needs to be seen. So I had them meet him. And I said, just, you know, if you can't remember anything else, just call him. He's got an extra key to the safe deposit box. I keep saying one more thing, but just one more thing. If you don't have a safe deposit box, it's a good idea. If only because that gives them one place to look. You know, they said something about a safe deposit box. What I did is I listed them as owners of the box. For this reason, this document says that they can access the safety deposit box. I don't know how long they're going to have to fiddle around with the bank to try and get access to the safety deposit box. They go in and show their driver's license, they have access. They won't have a key, they can just drill the box and pay the $40 fee, get the passwords. Because I tell them, when you see that I'm dead, assuming Donna goes first, lock those accounts down. Because there are fraudsters, convicts, who watch the obituaries. And they are looking to rip off your accounts knowing that you can't do anything about it. I said, get those passwords and shut those accounts down, change the passwords ASAP. And I assume that I'll go first. Now, I'll just tell you this, the middle daughter said, you know, people have been married a long time when they talk about who's going to die first, right? But you know, what if she goes first? What if I go first? Those are important questions. Who takes care of what? Because she takes care of a lot of important stuff. If she goes first, I'm going to have to hire like 3 people to help. Just be helpless about it. Okay, so I think I have no more one more things. With that, I'll open it up for questions. What questions do you have?
I was just wondering about living wills and maybe a power of health care, a power of attorney healthcare, like which one overrides the other one if they have like a.
Okay. That's good. The way I do a healthcare power of attorney, I have the living will in. So the living will, as I understand it, says, this is what I want. This is what I don't want. In terms of, I don't want my life to be artificially prolonged, or do everything you can to keep me alive as long as you can. That's the living will, or it's also sometimes called advanced medical directives. I incorporate it into a single document. Sometimes it's a separate document. I've spent a lot of time on advanced medical directives, trying to figure out what the right thing is. AARP has a form that you can get at the senior center. I'm not a big fan. I used that for a while, but I'd rather have a discussion with you and find out what quality of life is to you. And even at that, my friend who's the oncologist, I'm fortunate to have this oncologist. It's just, he's a nationally known cancer researcher. And then here in Sheridan, we have Deacon Greg, who's an oncologist. And what my friend told me is, he said, quite apart from whatever is on paper, he said it's just so complicated. You can't anticipate all the situations. He said there's no substitute for having a conversation with whoever it is that's making those decisions, typically your kids. And it's a hard conversation to have. But tell them what you want, you know, how you define quality of life. And with the understanding that changes, you know, what you think quality of life is, when you're sitting in the lawyer's office and you're 68 versus when you're in a nursing home and you're 84, you know, your definition, the hurdle gets a little bit lower pretty fast. Say, well, I may not be able to see or hear or walk, but by God, I'm still alive. You know, I'm plugging along. So that defines quality for me now. So it changes, but it's important that you have that discussion. I like to get a narrative that just gets as close as you can. So I'll give you an example. I have one version that some people gave to me that I thought was very well thought out. They said, we don't want any, you know, if there's no hope, don't give us any drugs that will prolong our life, unless it's a drug that's going to make us comfortable, but has the effect of prolonging our life. They've really thought that through, because there are some. So we used to do a lot of hospice when I was in healthcare, and we had a patient on board that had a very large tumor. Hospice, there's supposed to be nothing heroic, but they gave this fellow radiation to shrink the tumor because he was in such pain from the tumor. So arguably that prolonged his life, but it made him more comfortable. So they had really thought that through. The instruction that I've left is to my kids is, don't hesitate to use drugs that will make me comfortable if I've lost my mind. Because I've seen Alzheimer's and dementia patients who are just as gentle as a kitten, but some don't react well, and they become angry and mean and hostile. And my fear is that would be me. That's my great fear, is that I would say something to my children because I've lost my mind. And they would still hear their father saying that. So I tell them, don't hesitate to give me something that's going to remove that anxiety and that fear from me. You know, lift that from me. And if that just takes a couple pills, do it. So that's the advanced healthcare directives, is having those discussions. My kids think I'm a little crazy for having them, because I'll reopen those discussions with them periodically. And it's like, we don't want to hear this. And I go, yeah, I want you to hear it. It's important for you to hear it. So that's advanced medical directives. That's a good question. Thank you.
Take one more.
Yeah.
One more question.
Yeah.
To change the bill if you're going along and life situation changes, you want to make a change. I want everything done to save my time for now. I don't want it to be disciplined.
It's not hard. You just want to make sure that you get a hold of a lawyer to do it. Because people get tempted to start handwriting changes in, which from a legal perspective is very bad. Because then a court doesn't know whether to pay attention to the handwritten changes or not. So you can still, in Wyoming, you can still write a will by hand. It has to be entirely in hand. And then you have to sign it. And then, ideally you'd have a witness. But if you partially type it and partially do it by hand, and then the board goes, okay, now we don't know which of these was done at the time of the will and which was the one that people went back in later and started making changes, and if the changes are, they lose handwriting is this. So it's an amendment to a will. It's everything's last. It's called cut the costs. It's just usually one page that says I'm going to do this. Change it to read this. All right, we got some more speakers, and then if you have more questions after that, I'll be happy to circle back. Thank you all very much.
So our next speaker is Veterans Rights. So we have Curt here from the VA, and he's just going to talk a little bit. We will have a whole session with VA benefits and navigating the VA system. But Curt's here, and I know we already have some questions for veterans, so turn it over to Curt.
Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Curt Merriam. I'm a social worker at the VA. I've been there for 13 years. I work in a program called Caregiver Support, which is why we're here tonight recording these sessions so we can provide them to our caregivers throughout our catchment area, which is most of Wyoming, also to you all as well, and other people that couldn't make it. So, but one of the things that we also wanted to provide was just mostly to answer questions that you all might have if you have a veteran in your life, or if you have questions about access to benefits, what type of benefits they might get, how you get set up. So I don't have a whole lot specific that I particularly wanted to present on. I just more wanted to hear what questions you might have, or what particular situations you might have be in that would be helpful. So I guess I'll just kind of open it up with what general questions folks have about veterans benefits or church.
Even though he was talking about a living will, I think the VA has a form, and sometimes different facilities insist you have their paperwork filled out to follow, or get a copy of the one with the lawyer in the chart. So I don't know, as a social worker, if you
Sure,
have that
yeah.
nailed down.
So for whatever reason, in the healthcare system, social workers often deal with the advanced directive living wills. So in the healthcare system, those are primarily just for those end of life medical decisions. It does not encompass the financial piece of those. As a medical institution, we don't want to, we want those things separate. So the local hospital has just kind of general advanced directive living will forms. So does the VA. If you want those two things combined, the lawyers is the way to go to kind of get those two documents set together. So whether you're a veteran or not, you can go to your healthcare institution and ask for the advanced directive living will. Like I said, typically social workers are the folks that if you have further questions can walk you through all those kind of decisions on there and what that kind of means in the healthcare setting.
Piggybacking on that, is the form something that you can bring to another session? Because at the there's another session, access to care to veterans benefits. It would be nice to be able to see that form.
Sure.
And maybe some of us that are already have done forms, but maybe there's something that would be beneficial, or if someone hasn't done any and they need to start, is that possible to bring?
Yeah, the VA form, of course, would only work for the VA, and it doesn't have to be particular. The VA will take any form, the hospital will take it.
Okay.
The VA will take the hospital will take the VA's form, vice versa. Just you have to have a particular form in place. The VA is a federal institution, so then we come into situations where state laws apply differently than federal documents. So you have to finagle things as far as like what's the best way to sign it and make sure that it works for the state that you're in. What is important, of course, with the advanced directive living wills, though, is that you have that to whoever is going to make those decisions for you. So they have that document when they come and you're not able to communicate those things. And then also, if able, like the hospital should have that on file for you. The hospital will really likely be getting that care. So for the VA, for example, in Sheridan, Wyoming, we're primarily a mental health institution. We don't have folks in the facility that are typically passing away. The hospital does because they have higher level care. So I always tell our folks, it's good that we have it on file so we can provide it. But your institution, wherever you are, because we work with veterans throughout the whole community, so your local hospital should have a copy of that document on file. Right?
And it should be notarized.
Yes.
To be a notary, so I did that all the time at VA. So- And signed in front of the notary. Do not sign it aside from them and then hope they're gonna yay verily it and stamp it. You need to sign it with the notary and the loved one. And everybody needs to be on the same page, so.
So correct me if I'm wrong, but instead, Wyoming, notarized, and just the correct document, and that's what you use it. Is that right? Yeah, so
It's best.
the VAR form says that you can just sign it, but if it's notarized, it's much better. State law.
Someone has, this is about veterans' rights in general. If someone has a veteran that they're caring for, and that veteran has never received or registered with the VA, can they go to this VA and sign up?
Yes, absolutely. So we have I have business cards for our enrollment eligibility office too. So if you have a veteran and you're just kind of curious about what type of access to care that you or the veteran that you know would have, those would be the folks to call, or to just show up at our kind of main hospital entrance. So for those of you that have been up there, it's pretty confusing. So if you call enrollment eligibility, it's probably better to check on that first. If the veteran tried to get access before and was denied, things have changed. So it can depend on service area. So maybe someone was discharged other than honorable. There are circumstances where we still will provide some services, or depending on what area that person's served, more services. So that stuff is always in flux. So just because you were denied before, and if it's been a while, you can sure check again and see if eligibility has changed. Yes, ma'am. So there's quite a few ways to do that. So one of the best things is to get on that veteran's healthcare record as next of kin. A release of information is another way that we can chat with you without a release of information. I have business cards that I can give you. So as I mentioned, my program that I work in is called Caregiver Support. If you're signed up as a caregiver in our program, there's a part in the veterans chart where it says this person has signed a release of information. They have the ability to speak on behalf of the veteran, to communicate with their medical team. They can't make, some of those bigger decisions, but they can communicate about things like, my husband's medications aren't working, he's having these side effects, and the doctor can have that conversation. Okay, so the enrollment eligibility, and then so is the veteran who signed up for our services? Okay. Sure. The entry point for any veteran is to get established with a primary care team, and then so then those are the folks that the first go to for just kind of general questions if they're needs a wheelchair, some sort of device in the home. Right?
So is it all paper, or can they create a veterans account and then do a lot of these things online, like designation of who can speak to the doctor on their behalf?
We're still kind of old school.
As far as I know, the only thing that they can access online is just a history of the medical records. They can communicate with their providers, but they would need to fill out that form, or the veteran could call and make that request to have like the next of kin changed, something like that. They can communicate through our My Healthy Vet system to their providers and request that those things get changed, but they cannot go in and change them themselves.
Thank you.
Can we take one more question and we have another speaker?
Not a question, but information sharing. I'm doing this power of attorney as a medical care provider for my parents, and they're not veterans, but their primaries are here shared in Memorial Hospital. They do require a different document because they don't want to go through the legalese, even though that document's been provided. So it's a form called POLST. I'm not exactly sure what it actually stands for. I think it's life-saving treatment, what's going to happen at the end. So we're currently going through that worksheet right now.
Yeah, and so that,
I think it's shorter, it's sweeter, and that's why the doctor wants it versus all the legalese.
yeah, so the, and advanced directive forms can vary quite a bit from how specific they are in particular circumstances to be less specific. The VA's is more specific than my own, that my wife and I have, for example. And then there's the life sustaining treatments, and that's more of a discussion with the provider where, as Mr. Kinskey was talking about, but he has that discussion and trying to get like, what specifics do you want as you transition, whereas the advanced directive doesn't get that specific. So then it's documented.
Encouraged us in rural to also post it literally on the refrigerator. So if an ambulance or somebody were to come in my absence, they know what my mom and dad's wishes are.
Oh, well.
Okay. Yeah. Goals
Which
of care.
also covers my brothers because they're not ready to, they're not equipped, ready to do this yet.
Yeah, goals of, I was bracketing my brain to think what we call it. Goals of care is life sustaining treatment. So we call it inside the VA, that discussion. But yeah, thanks for bringing that up.
And we can bring post forms here. We can have them here.
One question I had for you as well is, I think one of the barriers to some of these the legal procedures is that some people feel like they can't afford a lawyer necessarily or access it. What would be a good alternative for folks when they?
The alternative would be to call the Wyoming Bar Association. They have an 800 number. And once a month, the local bar association has volunteer attorneys, usually at the courthouse, to help answer questions and very often to fill out forms. So you can get the form from the VA, or you can get advanced medical directives, medical power of attorney from senior center. And they can help you fill that out if the senior center can. So, and then these volunteer attorneys can't draft a will for you, but they can answer those legal questions and help get you started.
And Wyoming Legal Aid is pairing up with some of our social workers up at the VA, and they are doing clinics for veterans up there. I think there have been once a month. They've been trying to. They haven't had a lot of attendance. They have like slots to pre-sign up. So if there's some things like that you want to talk to somebody, that they come up to the VA and meet with you. We have flyers up there. We can get those out for you too.
We have one more question, quick. Is it for Curt?
Sure. We have another session regarding veterans benefits. But before that session comes, is there a possibility you could bring copies of the veterans benefits packages? Describing what types of services are available, i.e. Prosthetic items, home modifications, dental services. That way, caregivers can have some idea as to what kind of services are available. And it might help them formulate some of the questions that.
And it's a book.
It's a book, yeah.
And it's always changing. So kind of the similar advice that I gave is getting established with a primary care provider and then asking that team, can you do this for me? This is the problem that this is what I'm missing. And because we cover almost all of it.
Well, I used to work at the VA hospital also, and I know veterans benefits are it's complicated and navigate all those fields. But I think the booklets are very helpful.
Yeah.
Talk about caregiver services and talk about prosthetic services and those kinds.
Yeah, we'll see if we can.
I think it'd be very helpful.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Thank you, Curt. Thank you, Cherish. Thank you all for your questions. We have one more speaker. We always have a caregiver testimonial, so we have a few minutes, and Jeff Peterson is going to share a few notes or a few of his personal experiences as a caregiver. Thanks, all.
helpful this. So last year when I sat in this meeting, Dave gave a similar discussion about the binder. And as I sat here, I thought, well, I have a binder somewhere in my house that I don't know where it is. So if I don't know where it is, my kids could possibly never possibly know where it is. So after the meeting, we went back and my wife and I went through the house. We found the binder. We took our we made our own additions with bank accounts, insurance companies, got it all set up, kind of following Dave's instructions there. So these meetings are useful for us all. Called my kids over, had invited them for dinner, showed them the binder, kind of got the eye roll that you don't need this, Dad. You're years away from us ever looking at this. And I explained to them why it was important for us, for them to know where it is. So they kind of shook their heads and put it in a special place in the house. And they were more worried about what's for dinner than the book. But in the end, I knew I did my part by showing the kids. So that's one little story. But my bigger story is the struggle I've gone through with my parents to update their documents. About 35 years ago, they created a trust document that kind of lined out everything that David talked about today and where they wanted their things to go if something should happen to them. Well, maybe about 10 years ago, I made a suggestion to them that it's probably time to get the document reviewed. And at the time we made it, the grandkids were young, the grandkids were not in their mid-20s. They owned multiple houses in multiple states. They were still working. Their life had changed a lot since they created these trust documents. And my dad kept saying, well, no, my attorney says it's good. My attorney says it's good. Well, what I didn't know at the time was my dad somehow was confusing the trust documents and the attorney that drew that up with the trust department and the bank's fiduciary who was handling his assets. And he was getting his legal advice from the bank's attorney on how to do his investments, not listening to my questions about having the trust documents reviewed. At the time he was living in California, he claimed there were no elder care attorneys in California. Well, I lived in Palm Springs, California, which is a major retirement area. I did a little work on a whole list of elder care attorney specialists in Palm Springs. And he proceeded to tell me that none of them could help him. So I kind of dropped it. 5 years go by, and my dad and my mother moved to Cheyenne, and we still live in Cheyenne. And I brought up that again about, okay, now you moved to a third state since you had your original documents put together. And he still was not convinced that he needed to have his documents looked at. Well, good or bad, his sister passed away. She realized a lot of her documentation was not put together well at all. So he called me and said, who can I see and get our trust documents looked at? I about fell over. I called my sister and said, you're not going to believe the conversation I just had. I am. So I was living in Cheyenne. I was a business in Cheyenne. I knew quite a few attorneys. And I purposely picked out the right attorney to handle this paperwork. I went and met with this attorney before and explained to him all of my sister my concerns with him and his relationship with the attorney at the trust department in the bank back in Minnesota, and how we needed my dad to focus on the documents, not so much the funds. And it worked out good. My dad meets with the attorney. They go through all the documents. There was a number of things that had changed from 35 years prior when they created the trust documents. This attorney also did a deep dive into what was going on at the trust department back in the bank in Minnesota. And everything ended up being absolutely fine with the bank. So that was good. There was nothing that happened wrong there. In the end, my dad got his binder put together and it was done. I think this might have been 2021. We finally got it done. But we have accurate documents that I know where the binder is because the old documents I have no idea. My sister has the same binder in her house, and we do have them online as well. So as you were talking today, Dave, the whole thing kind of went back this full circle that I've done with my parents. So kind of my message is get your documents done, make sure your family members know where they are. I would go as far as to say it's 30-year-old documents are probably better than no documents, but updated documents certainly make it easier for everyone who's involved. So it's kind of my caregiver message. Take care of yourself, take care of your family, kind of know what you have. So if something happens, family members can find what they need to find. That's my story.
Any questions?
Any questions? Okay. I think we're kind of at time, so I just want to say thank you to Senator Dave Kinskey, to Curt, and to Jeff. And I want to read one little thing to all of you caregivers out of this caregiver therapy book. It's self-care is an essential part of caregiving. If you feel guilty when you want to take time off and care for yourself, remember, you can give more freely and effectively when you've replenished yourself. So thank you for coming, and we will see you next week. Next week, Cherish, what's our topic?
It is safety and mobility.
Safety and mobility. I guess that could be all of us, right? Thank you.